Good afternoon, guys. How are you? Welcome back to my garden. Welcome back to my channel. Summer has officially come to an end. The temperatures are getting cooler. Some plants are slowly starting to enter their dormancy. So today I need to do a bit of a post-summer cleanup. And I thought that this would be a really nice opportunity for us to chat a little bit about how to preserve your summer garden. Just because summer has come to an end doesn't mean that your garden has to come to an end. I absolutely hate when people say that balcony gardening is seasonal. It's not. It doesn't have to be. You can have a beautiful, lasting, 4 seasons garden, even in a small space in the city center on the 7th floor. And I'm gonna show you how in today's video. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you probably heard me say my garden is mostly perennial. What does it mean? It means that I'm not buying hundreds and hundreds of plants every year and trying to fill that space out from scratch. I have this big base. The majority of my plants are perennial. Some of them are evergreen, so it means they keep their foliage all throughout the year. They provide a beautiful interest no matter the season. And then some plants die down to the ground level at the end of the season, but then they come back again next spring. And then every year I just add a couple of new plants, a couple of seasonal flowers, just to change things up, just to add something new, something fresh. If you're just starting your balcony gardening journey and you don't maybe have everything just figured out yet, and you're maybe wondering, okay, but what does it mean, perennial plant? Like, how do I know if a plant is perennial or not? What's the difference between annual plant? What can I leave outside during winter? So, a perennial plant, like a heuchera here, is a plant that can grow for many, many years. On the opposite, an annual flower or an annual plant is a plant that completes its whole life cycle in one season. It germinates, grows, blooms, then sets seeds and dies all within 1 year. But whether a plant is perennial for you, whether it's going to survive winter outside in your garden, depends on 2 things. It depends on that plant hardiness, how resistant to cold that plant is. Same goes for plants that sometimes we call annuals, like begonias or euphorbias or petunias or coleus. Oftentimes you will hear gardeners call them annual plants. In fact, they are true perennials. These plants can grow for many, many years, but because they come from tropical climates, they are not very winter hardy. They don't tolerate cold temperatures. So oftentimes we just plant them for the current season, and then by the end of the year we get rid of them because in all cases they wouldn't survive winter outside. But that doesn't mean that they have to die. You can totally keep these plants for many, many years to come. So coming back to the heuchera case, how do I know that this heuchera is going to survive winter outside? Well, every plant is categorized to their hardiness zones. We have 13 growing zones in the world, 1 to 13. 1 is the coldest, 13 is the warmest, considering winter temperatures. So winters in zone 1 are the coldest, winters in zone 13 are the warmest. Heuchera is said to survive winters down to zone 4, so it's very, very winter hardy. I garden in zone 8A, so I know that heuchera can survive winters way below my growing zone. But a bay laurel here is only hardy down to zone 8. Which is my growing zone. So what does it mean? It means that it can survive winter outside, but I have to be careful because it's really at that limit where it may not survive, where it may get a little too cold for its liking and it may actually die. So if I want to leave this plant outside, I have to protect it. Check what's your gardening zone, what's your hardiness zone, and then you can check the hardiness zones of your plants and you can more or less know whether a plant can be left outside or it has to be protected, or we have to reach to some tips and tricks on how you can preserve that plant without leaving it outside to die. All right, we're gonna start in this very tight spot in between all of these plants here because I have 2 examples, herbs and ornamental plants that I'm gonna show you. So we are gonna start with coleus plant. It's one of those plants that grow really, really well in the shade, provides beautiful pop of color, and it can grow until very late into the season. It won't tolerate cold temperatures though, so once the temperatures start to drop to around 5 degrees Celsius at night, that's where coleus is kind of starting to be like, nope, not for me. So if you want to keep your beautiful coleus plants or any other plants that are not cold hardy, obviously you can bring the whole plant indoors. Coleus is one of those plants that grow really well indoors. There are many houseplant enthusiasts that actually grow coleus as houseplants. It can work really well. But if you grew coleus in your garden the entire season, chances are that the plant grew pretty enormous. I mean, look at this thing. It's really, really large. I absolutely don't have the space for it indoors. So what I'm gonna do instead, I'm gonna take cuttings. This way I can enjoy this beautiful foliage indoors, at home, throughout the entire winter, throughout early spring. And then in the spring, once the temperatures start to get a little warmer, I will have beautiful new young plants that I can transfer directly in my garden and then again enjoy them for the entire season. Same goes for herbs. If you have a herb garden, if you have some perennial herbs that are not cold hardy, maybe basil, mint is pretty cold hardy. You could totally leave mint outside, but maybe you want to enjoy some fresh herbs indoors during winter. You don't have to bring the whole plant indoors. You can just take cuttings, root them in water, and then either keep them in water. They can absolutely survive the winter just in a little glass of water, or you can just repot them later on. Just give them a couple of weeks to produce roots, then you can transfer them to small pots and enjoy fresh herbs at home throughout winter. So how to take cuttings from plants like these? If you look at the plant, you see the stem, then we have the leaf nodes on each side, and then if you look a little further up, some of these bloom stalks already started to produce flowers. So when you take cuttings, you don't want to take cuttings from a stem that has flowers already. And why? I'm gonna tell you in just a moment. So search for a stem without flowers. Now, I recommend that you take a cutting around the leaf node because it is in this space that the plant has hormones that will help it produce roots. So if you can take a cut, make a cut either right below or right above, that's really awesome. So let's do it. Now we are going to remove all the bottom leaves because we do not want those leaves to sit in water, to rot, and to cause our plant to die. Now I'm gonna still remove some of these leaves because the plant doesn't have any roots, so the more foliage it has, the more it will struggle. You can just leave maybe 2-3 leaves like this. Now we have 1, 2, 3 nodes, and all of these nodes can produce roots once we put it in a glass of water. There we go. Just like that, you can take several cuttings. The more cuttings you take, the more plants you will have, and later you can even repot all of these cuttings into one pot if you wish. Same goes for basil. You can see kind of the same principle. We have a stem, we have all of these leaf nodes, and we have a lot of flowers. Now I am gonna propagate the stem with the flowers because I think all of them, every single one of them has flowers. So I'm just gonna cut them off. We don't want flowers. Like, you don't want to cut here and then put it in a glass of water. We don't want these flowers. We want just vegetative growth, just like that. Here again, as you can see, I'm gonna take a cutting here. I'm gonna remove most of the leaves so that the plant doesn't struggle, so that it can focus on producing new roots instead of supporting all this vegetative growth, all these large leaves, just like that. 1-2 nodes that can produce us some roots. In a glass of water with my coleus. You can even have fun with this and make little arrangements of cuttings. I think that looks really pretty, especially if you use some more decorative vase. There we go. In a couple of weeks they will start to produce roots, and we can either leave them in a glass of water or we can transplant them. Just make sure to change water at least once a week so that it doesn't get all it doesn't start to develop algae and nasty things inside. You want to clean, fresh water. So the reason why I told you not to take cuttings from coleus that has flowers on it, there are 2 reasons. For once, bees and pollinators absolutely love them, so it's really cool to leave them a little bit of flowers, leave them some flowers in your garden. so late into the season. And then obviously there's one more way to propagate coleus plants, and it is through seeds. I absolutely love growing coleus from seeds. It's really fun experience and you can produce a ton of plants. We just have to leave those flowers a bit more time to ripen, then to produce seed pods, to produce seed, and then you can cut them off, bring them indoors, dry them a little bit, and then, you know, shake those seed pods. And the coleus seeds are very, very tiny. They're just like a poppy seeds almost. So keep that in mind, that they can even self-propagate in your garden. It happened to me many times, like the seed would drop somewhere in the pot and then the next year I have a coleus growing in there. That can happen. But yeah, you can totally propagate coleus from seeds. It's a really fun experience and you will find a guide on how to do it on my channel. Moving on, I'm staying in the same area of my garden because I have yet another example here to show you. But moving on to another category of plants that you may have in your garden, bulbs. Bulbs are my favorite category of plants because they are inexpensive, they can provide a ton of interest in your garden, there are so many different bulbs to choose from, and they grow really, really well in containers. Now, some bulbs can be winter hardy, so it means you can actually leave them permanently in your garden. In case of spring flowering bulbs, like for example daffodils. Daffodils are very winter hardy. What I do in my garden, I just leave them permanently in pots. And then once they are done blooming in the spring, I plant something else on top of them, either herbs or some summer flowers. And then once the season comes to an end, I remove those summer flowers and then I can plant pansies, I can just put pine cones or just leave the pots empty. And I know that the daffodils are coming back in the spring. Same goes for summer flowering bulbs. Now, around this time of the year, probably all of your summer bulbs are coming to an end. Like you can see here, my ornithogalum has this absolutely tall, enormous bloom stalk. It's done blooming. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut the bloom stalk off. I'm gonna go very low into the plant and cut it completely out. That's enormous. But as you can see, the foliage is still green. So I'm gonna leave the foliage until it turns yellow on its own. We don't want to cut the foliage too early, because if you cut the foliage too early, that means the plant has not accumulated, the bulb has not accumulated enough energy and it will not bloom for you next year. So even if a bulb is not winter hardy, you can leave them outside until you see that they start to wilt, that they start to turn yellow. In the case of ornithogalum, it's a winter hardy bulb, it's hardy down to zone 4. So I'm just gonna leave it completely in container. I'm just gonna leave the foliage to die down naturally and then it's gonna overwinter outside. But what about the bulbs that are not winter hardy? If you have any tropical bulbs in your container garden, maybe you have caladiums, maybe you have calla lilies, canna lilies, alocasias, colocasias, anything tropical that's bulbous, that has a storage organ. Dahlias, for example. Dahlias can take some frost, but not too much frost. I have successfully overwintered dahlias in my garden, but if your garden is on 5, 6, you should probably dig those dahlias up at the end of the season. But here again, we don't want to rush things up. We want those bulbs, those tubers to fully charge, to be ready to grow again beautifully, to bloom beautifully again next year. So as you can see, my caladium here is looking pretty sad, and that's fine. That's exactly what we want. By the end of summer, I start to cut down on watering, because obviously the plants are not nearly as active as they are during summer. The temperatures are lower, the light levels are lower, so I just cut down on watering. And then once I see that plant really flop over and look tired, what I do is I will cut all this foliage. And if you are creative, you can absolutely turn this to an art. You can take a beautiful caladium leaf, frame it, or do whatever creative idea you may have, because I think they are so beautiful and you can totally preserve it. I've seen some ideas online, but I'm not a very DIY kind of person. So I cut the foliage and I'm gonna dig the tuber, the corm technically, out. Now, with any bulb or tuber that you want to preserve, it is crucial to preserve it well, because if you don't, well, then that bulb is gonna rot and you won't have a beautiful plant next year, or no plant at all. So cut everything off, all the stem, all the roots, all the leaves, and clean it with a soft brush. The same principle applies to any bulb that you're gonna work with. All right, so here they are. Now, the most important part right now is to allow these bulbs to dry. You do not want to put this into storage. Wet bulb equals rotten bulb. So I put them indoors and I put them on a paper towel or some, tissue, and I will leave them for as long as it takes, even up to 1 week. I want to make sure that they are fully dry before I put them into storage. And then I'm going to store them in a paper bag, just put them in a carton box somewhere in my wardrobe or somewhere on the shelf, and they will wait until I'm ready to plant them again next spring. All right, another example that I want to show you is with my calla lilies. Now, as balcony gardeners, we work in small spaces, we work with limited amount of pots, and if you want to create a 4 seasons garden, sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where you want to switch already to that next season, but the previous season hasn't ended yet. What I mean by that is, here I have my calla lilies. I cannot overwinter calla lilies outside, they are not frost hardy, so I have to dig them up and store them over winter. They are not quite ready to be dug out yet though. I mean, they start to be ready, but I could definitely keep them for a while longer in these pots. But what to do if I actually need these pots to plant my spring flowering bulbs? So we are in October, it's time to plant spring flowering bulbs. And I don't have empty pots and I want to plant my spring bulbs here. What do? I can actually dig these bulbs up very gently, not to break those leaves. I'm gonna shake off excess soil and I'm gonna lay them flat and leave them to dry on my bench. The reason why I keep the foliage is because I want all those last bits of energy in those leaves to go down to the storing organ. This way I'm not losing next year's flowers. Obviously, you don't want to do it too early in the season, but if you do it around this time of year, it's usually safe. I have done this with over 30 begonia tubers that I dug up last year from my railing planters, and I sent them to my grandmother. She planted them in her garden this year, and they were absolutely massive, absolutely stunning, covered with flowers. Okay, another advice that I would like to share with you today, and I think that this one is particularly important if you are a beginner gardener. I know that as beginner gardeners, we often get overwhelmed. We compare our gardens to other people's gardens and we fall into that trap of thinking, oh, my plants are not beautiful as hers, or I don't have as many plants as she does. My garden is not as full as hers. And we can kind of feel really discouraged to continue. I've been there myself, so I know what I'm talking about. But the thing that I want to say is that if you planted a lot of new plants this year, or maybe you planted, especially if you planted some perennial plants, and they look like this, or like this, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Actually, perennial plants are awesome because, as we said at the beginning of this video, they can grow for many years. But that also means that they take time to mature, and they take time to actually put on a beautiful growth, to actually look really, really gorgeous. So if you planted some new perennial plant and she hasn't done much, she's been just sitting there whole year, that's fine. Don't get rid of it just yet, keep it, and maybe you will be surprised next year it will actually push new fresh growth and you will be happy that you kept it. This is my beautiful Hosta Halcyon, beautiful, gorgeous blue foliage. This is also a Hosta Halcyon, and before this plant can look like this, it has to look like this. It has to have 4 leaves and look absolutely bold and ridiculous. But that's okay, because next year, with proper care, this plant is gonna put on some beautiful growth, and in a couple of years, this will turn into this. My tender perennial plants are propagated so that I can use new fresh plants next season. My summer bulbs, those that are not frost hardy, are dug out. Soon they will be stored for me to use them again next year. Now the last thing left to do in my garden is to prepare all these plants that are gonna stay outside for winter. How to do it? Well, for this I invite you to watch the other video, 10 tips on how to overwinter your potted plants. I hope that you found some helpful tips in today's video. If you did, I would appreciate if you could leave it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to the channel for more container gardening content. Thanks so much for joining me today in the garden. We'll see each other again in the next video.